Okay, sorry for the delay, everybody. We are live now. Final lecture. Not even really much of a lecture. So as you may have seen, a lot of you. Like this week, for the most part, anytime I'm within about 100 yards of the lab, there's like 3 people who really need my help, and I'm like, I'll get to you. You're in the line, and then I'm sure I forget about it. So I apologize for that, and I sent out the announcement, but. There's so many people still actively working on their board, and when I think about it, the stuff that's going to take me a long time to grade that I need to get out of the way ahead of time is the lab notebook and the final. So I requested that people get that stuff turned in by Sunday night. That way I'll be able to start grading that on Monday and Tuesday, and then I'm just planning to be here sort of in the labs all day Monday and Tuesday of next week for people working on their boards. Yeah?
What information from the project do you want in our lab notebook?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if you're turning in your lab notebook before you do the project. So one thing is, a lot of people who did the project, they were sort of almost putting it in their lab notebook like it was a lab where they were like recording surface mount resistor values, which is not normally something that assembly process normally isn't the same as like an experimental process. So my biggest thing for the project in the lab notebook is I wanted to see kind of your narrative of your thought process for it, right? You know, basically like, you know, a sketch of a circuit that would, okay, it has to do this and this and this. Here's a circuit that could do this. Here's a circuit that could do that. Any information in there about like your assembly and testing process, like if you ran into an issue, you know, if you, I would say, if you want, you can include, now the thing is a schematic is normally considered sort of separate documentation in terms of like, you can put your whole schematic inside your lab notebook, but it's okay to simply reference it, right? If you're doing a lab notebook, the whole reason we have that little key at the bottom right corner of the schematic is so that you can say things like, okay, in schematic revision 1.1.7, this R3 we found out was wrong, it was messed up, we had to change it for something else. So things like that, details like that. There may not be a lot for your project. A lot of your projects, most of the work you did was stuff that wouldn't necessarily be recorded in a lab notebook. Like, I soldered all the parts in. There's not much more to say in a lab notebook other than that, right? Unless you want to really get long-winded about it. But that's something that might take you 4 hours to do, you know, on your own, and then your entry in your lab notebook might literally be 1 line, you know. December 2nd, I soldered in the components, and I tested it. And then my op amp got really hot, and so I realized something was wrong. And then troubleshoot, right? You know, maybe you say I measured the voltage at this node and found it was a volt lower than it was supposed to be. Okay, you know, things like that, right? So you might say it's mostly going to be your design planning stuff, which may only be 1 or 2 pages or so of sketch circuits and things like that. And then it might be your troubleshooting stuff, but I understand if you're turning it in before you possibly finish that stuff, it might not be there. The biggest thing for me, when I'm looking through lab notebooks, you do have to have project components in there, but mostly what I'm going to be doing is going through each of your labs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and making sure they're all there, and making sure the components are there. So most of the time consuming for me that I care about most is those labs. It's sort of the first time that see it. So yeah.
Since lab 5 was like in between the project, is it okay if that's like not in order? Like I had like the project design and then lab 5 and like the assembly process of the project.
Yeah, lab notebook should always be in chronological order. So if you did lab 5 after you started the project, it should exist after the project. So it shouldn't be in order of scheduled events. It should, lab notebooks should maintain a flow of what you did in time, not what you did in terms of like organization. And I understand some people, said, oh, I left a couple pages blank. And if they told me that, I left a couple pages blank to go back and do lab 5. Some people told me that, and I sort of said, you're not supposed to do that, but it's okay, I understand. So, but yeah, so the idea of a lab notebook is it should be chronological no matter what. So it should always be. So if you're working on multiple projects, most people actually either keep multiple lab notebooks, or they keep like 1 for each project, or they just jump, line across the page, date. Here's what I'm switching over to this project. Here's what I did. I assembled all the resistors from schematic version 1.0.0 or whatever, plugged it in, and nothing worked. Everything was off. So something's wrong, period, right? Next day, something like that. So, but, it's mostly, most of your points for the project are going to come from that finished board, finished PCB design, your finished schematic, and your soldering and your progress, so actually doing the stuff. And keep in mind that the reason we go through this project exercise in this class mostly is, the design is fairly straightforward. It's stuff you could have done after lab 3 or 4 is most of this design components. The other stuff, the stuff like just the general kind of understanding how you place parts at the edge of a board, understanding how you do the PCB stuff. That's all sort of a contrived element that we've added to this class just because we need to start preparing people for that stuff earlier. So it's not really, it's a disconnected thing, but that's mostly what the project is meant to capture. The project doesn't really capture, do you know how to analyze op-amp circuits? Because, come on, it's more of a, are you able to design a circuit? Are you able to assemble it? Are you able to troubleshoot it? Are you able to solder? These sorts of things, they just don't fit well in the other curriculum, right? We don't have a class that's like how to do hot solder stuff, right? We just toss it in somewhere. So, but actually they've been very good. I think 20 of you have submitted your stuff already. So 20 of you have submitted, so that's a little bit less than half of you have submitted stuff already. You are free to resubmit. If something I say today makes you say, oh shoot, I forgot to do this, you can, resubmit your schematic or PCB if you notice something or things like that. So the biggest stuff I look for in the schematic, everything has to be annotated. Everything has to be clean and orderly. It's got to be, when you look at it, you got to be able to fairly easily see connections. I talk to people about long lines running across the schematic. That's okay. What you don't want to have is spaghetti wire. So sometimes you have like a schematic. So a lot of people start to do this, right? It's okay. Right? Once it starts to get crazy, right? Once it starts to get to the point where your eye starts to have to do this, hold on. Right? If it's, it's okay for wires to cross as long as there's not a dot there. What you don't want to have is, you want it to be visually very clear. Oh, I see, that wire is just running across there. When you start to get too many of them overlapping, and you start to have to do like the follow the line with your finger kind of thing, that's where it's no longer effective on a schematic. That's where you'd want to switch to a net label or something like that. So, should be grid aligned. Everything should be annotated. Everything should be connected properly. There shouldn't be random. Right? If you have like a op amp like this, then there's a ball at the end of it. And so a node dot in Altium means that more than 2 things are connected there. But if I see a dot and there's not more than 2 things connected there, that usually means you had an extra wire stuck in there, but it's a red flag that something is amiss, right? That if you have, because sometimes if there's a dot there and it's just 2 things connected, sometimes it means there's one thing overlapping another thing, and that's a very difficult thing to see. So if there's a dot, it should always be a point where 3 or more things connect together, not where 2 or more things connect together. Should be annotated, should be clear, laid out, should have everything, should have your name and stuff in the bottom corner. For the PCB, it should just generally be clean and organized. I told people some people it was clear their boards were pretty excessively auto-routed, where it really wrapped tight every trace around like as close as it could to every pad. I suggested that people space that out to have it look a little bit less likely to cause a soldering issue. Whether or not if people did find errors, that's fine. Again, I told people you don't even have to get, you don't have to get a working board going for this project. You don't have to get it all fully working. It's mostly about going through the process, and if it doesn't work, knowing why it doesn't work and correcting those errors for it. So, how many people are going to wait? I sent out the links to the DHL order for the last batch, which, how many people were going to wait for that to do? Okay, yeah, I think that's going to work. Don't trust that, though. Don't trust that. Yeah, it's not supposed to come until the 13th. DHL just started saying, it's going to take 2 weeks for everything. And so don't trust it. It'll be here. Did it say it actually shipped out of China already? I
think it said it was
still China. Okay, but still, usually it gets here in about 3 or 4 days. So I would be very comfortable saying it will be here early next week. So if people did want to sort of rely on that, but just note that after Wednesday, I won't be in lab at all. You might still be able to email me and get a response over email, but it's going to be a little bit tougher.
Do you think you'll do this project again next year?
Not the same one, no, not the same one. So we've changed the project every year. The issue we've had in the past is normally, in the past 2 years, none of you would even have your boards yet. We have, in the past, we didn't do the board designs until after we had done buck and boost regulators. and the project requirement was to have a buck and boost component on it, which is nice to be able to do. But the downside was that was even before the COVID shipping stuff was going on. That was when we could pretty reliably get our PCBs here in a week. And it was like finals week, Monday, the orders were coming in. And so then you have a bunch of people, if they notice errors then, they're just toast. So the number of people who successfully got designs working was pretty low. And so even here, a lot of people, right, you got to hack jumper wires together, you got to do some squirrely stuff, you got to change some values. But most people who have tried to tackle their board have gotten it at least mostly working. And so that's not something we had in the past. But I think if we do it again, it'll probably be a modified version. You know, this is the first time we started Altium as early as we did, and it still kind of ended up being a little bit late, but there's a limit to the timing that we can do if we actually want to go through the Altium stuff. So next year I'm probably going to probably go back to a more traditional delivery format too, just because what I really wish we could do in this program is do twice as much like lecture time. I mean, I like having like an hour of lecture live, and then I like being able to work problems together, but I don't think it really fully works out because it's like maybe 50% of people watch the videos, and there's like I get a lot of questions that are like very clearly answered in the videos, and I'm like, I don't know how much the video watching is happening. And I talked to our colleagues too, and like we're all sort of like, yeah, the videos are nice to have as like a backup for students to look at as a reference, but we're kind of realizing you can't really rely on things you didn't say to a group of people actively in class actually being communicated to the whole class. So, and even with videos, right, it's easy to skip one, or it's easy to miss one, or have one sort of misadjusted on the thing. So it'll probably be a little bit different next year, but this one was the first one that was, when we did the headphone amplifier one for a while, but it wasn't a custom PCB. It was just assembling. So once we switched to custom PCB, headphone amplifier didn't work too well. We did the ornament, that was pushed way back too far till the end. So it'll be something slightly different, not the same project. Somebody, are you thinking about taking it again, or are you just gonna warn me? Don't. Yeah. Yeah. We also. Okay. So yeah, so on the PCB, but also remember you are required to have your name somewhere on the PCB. So I noticed some people's PCBs did not have their name on the PCB, so try to do that when you submit your PCB board files. I should be able to look just at the images and know whose board it is. So it should be somehow identified that it's you. And then if it's a test procedure, we don't test procedure is something we go over a lot more when you get to senior project, because that's a big part of the senior project. Is the senior project, you have to design your circuit to be able to be tested. So you have to design your circuit so that you're able to assemble part of it, test it, assemble the next part, test it, or assemble the whole thing, remove the appropriate 0 ohm resistors, test the appropriate test points to find sort of unknown values or whatever values you need. So yeah, so there's going to be a lot more of attention to that. So when you get to the senior project, next time you see Altium that I know of for the senior project, it's going to be, oh, actually, you know what? This class is next going to be taught in the spring. We're teaching it this spring because we're switching to teaching it twice, I believe, twice a year. But the person teaching it is going to be a new NTT named Tina Smilstack, I think, Tina Smilstack. So I don't know. I've actually been spending this quarter working to like add extra details to the syllabi and stuff like that. We have like a hidden set of syllabi that's in the department that it's kind of the same as your syllabi, but it also says like, here's how it connects to the other classes that the people have taken, and here's what, if they didn't get this knowledge in this previous class, it makes it really tough for this class. All these sorts of connections are a separate set of documents we do. And yeah, so it's going to be taught this spring by somebody else. And they do know they have to use Altium, or they have to use whatever software is going to be used by the senior projects, but I don't know how it's going to go with that. So by this Sunday, be sure to do your final exam, your final take home. Be sure to turn that in, get that turned in. Be sure to get your lab notebook turned in. And then I will be here Monday and Tuesday of next week in the lab to help people out with their stuff. I feel as I'm talking now that I told somebody I'd help them solder. No, I think we did that. I think that was yours. No, I think that's good. Okay. Anyway, that ding just means that my kid just left the house to go to gymnastics. So I gotta pick her back. I just said I'd pick her back up, but yeah, and then get your 4 project stuff turned in by get your 4 projects. Oh, I didn't change the due date on the homework, but I meant to change the due date on the homework too. So the homework will be delayed until Thursday as well. So homework till Thursday, but just get the lab notebook and the final turned in by Sunday because that's what's going to take most of my time to grade. Anybody have any questions? Everybody looks so dead. It's like, yeah.
How much detail are you looking
When I say annotations, I just mean the naming, the numbering, right? So it should say R1, R2, R3. If it says R question marks, you're going to get docked points for that. So yeah.
So when our PCB, let's say it doesn't work, right? How much detail you want in that procedure? You want like, let me try and be vague about it. Would you like, high school like lab document procedure, or like
So that
a little bit more than that?
if the board doesn't work and it would need a new board to fix the issue that you have, the procedure in that document, it should not be like wordy. It should be a bullet point list of here is the order of operations that with this new design I did that should fix the errors. Here's the order of operations that would verify the proper operation of the circuit. So it should be, so most of you didn't follow like a procedure, but a lot of you didn't have major issues, right? So a lot of times if you build a board and then all of a sudden you plug it in, it's a short circuit and it's some terrible thing, nothing's working. Normally that's when, rather than trying to get your existing built one working, you would start over with a fresh one and just start populating it piece by piece. You'd say, all right, let's put the USB connector on and this couple of resistors and then make sure the power is good. And then you would say, okay, now I'm going to wire up the resistors for op amp 1 and then plug it in. Okay, those resistor dividers show the proper value. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to add op amp 1. After I add op amp 1, okay, yes, now I test that the voltage across the op amp while it's plugged in is correct. I test that the voltage is in the right order. I retest the voltages at all of those resistor dividers, make sure they're still accurate. Then populate all the resistors for op amp 2. Plug it in, make sure any dividers we added for op amp 2 were correct. Then add the actual op amp, make sure that all of those active op amp circuits are functioning correctly. And then, so basically that's what the instruction should be. It's going to be pretty long. It's going to be about...
So step you through the process, be as detailed as necessary.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be wordy, but it should be explicit. It should say,
very explicit.
Populate R1, R3, R7, R12. Measure on the left side of R12 to verify that this voltage works, that sort of stuff. It's going to be about a page, that procedure that you would go through. So it's not going to be like a quick thing. It's going to be fairly detailed, but it shouldn't be, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary to fix a, it doesn't have to be wordy. I see some people write lab reports really like you're told by an English teacher, you can't just cut to the chase. You gotta, it's like a recipe that you find online, right? It's like, you want a soup recipe and it's like, when I grew up, my grandma always, there's like 5 pages of that. And then you find out 2 pounds of beef. Scrolling in the supermarket, what do I need? Chives, okay. Yeah, so it shouldn't be wordy, but detailed for sure. Okay, any other questions about submittal stuff? Yes.
You want us to determine a hard final?
I think because it's like multiple choice, so I do have to record your final scores problem by problem. So like so you're going to see the same thing as midterm 1 where it's like it's just giant, just splash the pond of the grade book. But I do that so that I have a record of stuff that, so I can look back and say, okay, how well did they understand this? Okay, this was tested on final question number 4. So I can look back and see how good people did on certain categories. So I don't care either way. You can turn it online or in person. Online actually might be easier because it's fairly small paper-wise. The stuff that's better on paper to get is when there's like a lot of, some of you like, when you take photos of your documents, like, I don't know, like your cell phones are like still from like 1994 or something like that. But like they're like shady and like it's like a sepia filter or something. It's like weird. And it's washed out. And but anyway, so when there's like a lot of work and it's, especially if it's like a timed exam when it's stressful and people start doing that stress writing where they're like writing up the side of things, and that's when it's good to have the physical copy. But yeah, I think either way is fine by me. if it's a huge amount of work to switch it from one to the other, then let me know. But I mean, just turn it in. You can also turn it in with your lab notebook. So if you have a paper copy of your midterm, that's probably not a good idea. Don't do that. I take that back. Slip it under my door or put it in my box in the main office. So, yeah.
I'm gonna actually ask about that final. Should we like print out like the thing, because it's the multiple choice one, should we just like print them out, circle them, and like staple all of our work onto that, or are we good just at the end of our problems like I picked this one?
So the one thing about multiple choice, I do give partial credit for multiple choice in the sense that a lot of times there's a multiple choice answer where, so I told people last time that the questions aren't meant to be tricky, but the answers sometimes are tricky in terms of like, so like doing the problems correctly is usually none of them, I don't think, have any sort of trick that's supposed to like trick you. But there are some questions where the correct answer is none of these. And so that is sort of automatically considered tricky, but sometimes it's like there was one answer that most people just made a mistake and chose that and they did the work right. And so if you've gotten that, I'll give you like 4 out of 5. Whereas
I was just asking about the printing part. Like, should we like print out like the midterm?
Right. I mean in terms of showing your work, it might actually be useful to show your work for some of the stuff. So so you might want to, but but you can keep it digital if you want. You can keep it all written down on the thing. I would keep it in the format. Yeah, please don't. Yeah, I wouldn't do a new like. Problem 1, my answer is C. Problem 2, that's going to be annoying to grade. So, try to show your answers on the actual pages of the actual.
Oh, way ahead of you on that one. You're going to see my mad work.
Okay, all right. Well, it's not that much partial credit. There's a reason it's mostly multiple choice.
You're a mad scientist.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Are Class A amplifiers cheaper than Class B, and B less than?
So with any of these amplifiers, in terms of cost, was there a question that related to cost, or just curious?
It's about cost, efficiency of the. Like which configuration?
Oh yeah, it's all based on the number of transistors, right? So I mean, it's really based. The cost is ultimately based on the number of transistors. So, so the cost-wise, the most expensive is Class D. But the issue is with these amplifiers that in reality, you can put as much cost into an amplifier as you want to fix whatever problems you're noticing. So probably the most expensive amplifiers they sell are actually Class A amplifiers, just because the people buying them are buying these Macintosh amplifiers that are like $5,000, and they have a circuit that's meant to tune the behavior of the circuit that burns 1,000 extra watts to give them, slightly marginally improved harmonic distortion, but that's what people pay for. So like Fabio speakers literally are like, the amplifiers are like $50,000, and they are Class A amplifiers, and they're super inefficient. But in terms of cost, it's almost always the complexity based on number of transistors. So Class D is almost always more expensive. So Class A and Class C is like the cheapest. Class A is then cheaper. AB is a little more expensive. Class D is the most expensive in terms of cost. But what I kind of want to look at the question now as you're saying that. I want to see what it's. Is it a question on the final?
Yeah, it just said like, this is the problem we have. It's like send a signal.
Oh yeah, okay. So So that was the question. The sending a thing to Venus, right? A signal to Venus. So that is a bunch of word problems. So the wordiness of it is just to make a contrived justification for the solution, right? The question is just saying, you don't care about distortion at all. All you care about is putting out the most power possible. And there is an amplifier topology that is a less common one. That is the one time it has an application. So wink, wink, hint, hint. It's not meant to be like it's not meant to be that tricky. It's just the wordiness is just because it's got to be a word problem. It can't just be like, what amplifier would you use in this one case that's literally on the slide, the one bullet point for why you would ever use this thing.
So it's single direction.
That's just words, yeah. Oh, like the focus beam? No, that's just word. Yeah, that's just wordiness. Yeah, just wordiness. Yeah, it's not meant to be. That's one of the hardest things. Thinking back on it in school, that's one of the hardest things is knowing what information to ignore. whenever you get a problem like that's more valuable. Knowing what you're supposed to ignore is more important than knowing what's important. So, otherwise, people get on this wild goose chase through their textbook looking for a case that's similar when none of it mattered except for the one thing that was mentioned. Other questions? Boy, this is for the first quarter that's kind of like fully back. You are all way burned out. As soon as finals are, how many finals do you have next week? Wait, somebody said 4? Oh, 1. Okay, just 1. Who is it? Is it Morton or Ying? Ying. I shouldn't say Ying because people probably don't call her Ying. They probably don't. Maybe you do. She's pretty nice. She's probably. But yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think Morton's probably pretty burned out too. Did he throw out his back? I heard he threw out his back. He does a lot of stuff around the house. He does a lot of handiwork, and his house is like 3 stories high. So danger over there. So that's good. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Morton, but for him, it's like he's got a big teaching load in the quarter. For me, it's I got a surgery. I have cosmetic surgery, really posh stuff. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Wonderful quarter. I'll see you probably next week. I'll see you. Probably I'll be in the labs next week, no matter what.